Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Game Souk number 39. This is really exciting. Before we get into some serious topics, let's talk about something fun, which is this is Pokemon's 30th birthday this week, or we talked about it last week. Our card is my favorite card, Eliza. You did a phenomenal job on our picture. I kind of feel like we should make this more permanent of us, basically playing on the Nintendo Switch 2. What you can't see is we're playing Pokopia, which is the game that just came out today, exclusively for the Nintendo Switch 2. Anyway, we're gonna dive in today. There is so much to talk about here. We really wanted to start with the situation that I feel like yesterday we all got slammed with UGC news on Epic and Roblox. We had a lot of questions, which was great. We also put out our report on age verification. So check that out at our Substack, signumgc.com, or just send us your email and we can add you to the list. But anyway, so let's dive in. And before we do, I'll just remind everyone that these are personal opinions. This is not investment advice. So we are not advising anyone to buy, sell, or hold any security. We may or may not hold positions in the companies we mention. And again, this is just personal opinion. So let's kick off with President Trump's tweet yesterday. This really got under my skin, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel like there are many truths to uncover here. And what it was this idea. Well, actually, it was a Financial Times report. And let me share my screen so everybody can see it. It was a news article. It wasn't a tweet. Let's see. Let me know when you guys can see it. I see Miles. There we go. Okay, so Trump administration debates allowing Tencent to keep its gaming investments. Now, this is really important in the context of Epic Games. There are reports, publicly available reports that Tencent owns from 28%, which is what the FT said, up to 40%. Riot Games is a wholly owned entity. And so this it was concerning to us because it was a flashback to 2018 when this was a hot topic with Epic, and 2018, 2019. And what we thought we should do is just go back to Epic Games comments on this, which we'll have here. So this is April 4th, 2019. Tim Sweeney said, "I am the controlling shareholder in Epic Games. I have been since 1991. We have a number of outside investors now. Tencent is the largest. All of Epic's investors are friends and partners. None can dictate decisions to Epic. None have access to Epic customer data." So, and then he says all of Epic's big decisions are made here in the USA, and as CEO, I'm 100% responsible for them. A deeper rabbit hole that we dove into back in 2019 was this idea of Chinese access to Epic infrastructure. And what we concluded was there is none. And over the last month and a half, we've been hearing a narrative through questions from other investors around the idea that Tencent has access as a strategic partner of Epic to services and to servers and infrastructure. And we believe that is completely false. We believe that Tencent is a financial investor. The other thing that I think is important to put in context here is that when you look at Tencent as a company, 580 billion market cap as of this morning on PitchBook, they have 786 holdings according to PitchBook, mostly in gaming and technology. That is a lot of holding. This is basically what we always call Tencent is like a mutual fund of holdings across gaming, entertainment, tech, etc. And I thought it would be important to put this into context of actual mutual funds and ETFs. Fidelity Growth Fund Company, managed by Steve Weimer, one of my friends, who's great. 83 billion AUM, 606 holdings, so a little bit smaller than Tencent. ARKK, the ARK Innovation ETF, who's friends and family of ours, 6.6 billion, 47 holdings. So Tencent is invested in a lot of companies. And the fact that Epic is called out here, I think is it's important to set the record straight in terms of the facts. Now, the company has not come out with anything publicly on this, but just knowing Tim Sweeney's ethos around privacy and protection of individual privacy and data, I don't believe that Tencent has any access to Epic Games infrastructure. So, any comments on this, guys?
I mean, you know, you've laid out a very rational case for why this is silly. Unfortunately, I don't think reason is the correct tool to use here. We're weaponizing ownership, and this is we were talking about before we went live. This is reminiscent of what's happened last week, which we'll probably talk about separately with Anthropic. So I don't want to get ahead of things, but there is a real let's say amoral a logical, meaning doesn't matter whether reason applies or not, approach that the Trump administration is using to generate leverage in places, which is the sort of typical maximalist strategy of we're going to, grab as much territory as we can before we cede something tactically, right? And I think that's exactly what's happening here. And from my perspective, the right context for this is that there's a lot of ground setting ahead of the Trump Xi summit in a little bit more than 3 weeks. And like to me, this is, while it's obviously worrisome in many respects, it is nevertheless typical kind of arsonist firefighter tactics, right? Set the fire, put it out yourself, or put it out cooperatively, and then celebrate the collective firefighting in the context of doing a bigger deal. And one of the, you could rightly say in the context of a trade deal, or a broader deal that they may be working on, what's on offer here other than dialing back tariffs, which in many respects the Supreme Court has done for President Trump and trade delegates. Another aspect is ownership of assets or ownership curbs with respect to things that are not a national security threat, which is exactly what Tencent represents here. Meaning we're not talking about AI, we're not talking about NVIDIA chips, we're just talking about basic entity ownership. And so this feels like even a watered down version of the ByteDance TikTok discussion, more so than it does a something's going on in gaming that the Trump admin like I just don't think that's what's happening here.
Really good point. Yeah. I mean,
So
Eliza, you had a comment earlier when we were talking about this about there were a lot of companies that were mentioned here that aren't even in the U.S., right?
Yeah, there was the supercell. It was getting it also bunched in with this notion of should Tencent be able to hold, owning aspects of Supercell, which is a Finnish company. So
And as
there
a
is,
Swedish Finn,
yeah, as a Swedish speaking Finn, I'm like, what on earth do you have to say about like you have no precedence here for sure. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, the big thing that the US could do in that case would be block Supercell games for the fact that it would be a 10 cent, backed company. I think the Finnish government is equally cautious. I know that there was a lot of discussion back in the day when Supercell took the got bought out by Tencent. A lot of Finnish consumers were very worried about their data, and I do believe that similarly they have a sort of moat around what user data gets shared. So I don't think these deals would have happened back then if that data would have been compromised. That's my own personal take on it. However, I do understand the public's or like this sort of scrutiny in that we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And I think that's where, there's room for speculation and there's absolutely room for making this a political debacle.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. Okay. We are going to go to some more positive news on Epic and Google. that was announced yesterday. We've been writing about this, Keshav, for a while. I don't know if you want to go to this or should we go to, maybe we should get the politics out of the way and then we can get to the technology. I think that might be better. I'm sorry to switch midstream, but James, another topic that we had a lot of questions on yesterday was
Huh.
around the state of Nebraska and Roblox. Is this just another state piling on to the child safety issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think so personally. They have accused the platform for being a playground for child predators. And they're joining what feels like every other state in America. I think this puts us up to like 8 or something like that. They largely, I guess, don't understand the platform. I think 'cause a lot of like what they're referencing is like stuff from Studio and stuff that you can only get if you have special access to it. But I think the most concerning thing in, something that they're pushing for, which I feel like is the underlying thing that these states are trying to achieve, is they say the defendant, nor does the defendant require users to provide any type of age or identity verification to sign up, which I feel like is essentially what everyone is using Roblox for. It feels as if the government, people of power, the tech billionaires, the people that like run the world, would much prefer it if we were using the internet and everyone was verified, and we give up our own data and we give up our anonymous. I can't speak today. Our anonymous like persona that we have online, and I actually think that's a really, really bad step. And I get that maybe we want to try and protect kids and we should want to protect kids, but I don't think, them having little Timmy's like date of birth certificate or like passport or whatever when he's 9 is relevant. I just don't think we need to be uploading ID to any platform, not just to Roblox, to TikTok, to Instagram, like anywhere. I think that, this comes with also YouTube announcing like a couple of months ago that you're not going to be able to comment on YouTube in 2027 if you haven't ID verified. I just think it's a really bad direction for the internet. I don't know if other people feel different, but
Personally, I quite enjoy the idea of accountability, especially in commenting. I'm sorry, but people get away with way too much stupidity online. And if you are at least being tracked in some degree and held accountable, I mean, I do not like the nefarious aspect of sort of this data mining, which can absolutely be used in terrible ways. Especially, we've already seen it with Cambridge Analytica, in political scenarios. But accountability is something that is absolutely missing from our social spaces. Whereas if you go outside and you're in a group and you say something, people can see you, people can see who you are, they know where you're going next, like you're held accountable for what you say in a physical space. The fact that you can go and review bomb and be an asshole in so many different places without any accountability, to me, is a problem. I do wish for more accountability. I do think that we should care about what we say and what we do in online spaces. I don't know that this age verification is the way, but it is interesting to me, specifically that fact that you cannot comment on YouTube videos without this. To me, I'm just like, oh, thank God. I don't know why that was the relief that I got, but yeah. So there's just an underlying side from my point of view. Andy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to share screen because we put this out this week. Xandros, who just joined our team, welcome Xandros. And as a strategy associate, Keshav and I wrote this report about, and all of us contributed to it, about the idea about all of these platforms trying to figure out age verification, and we think it's an inevitable outcome that they all will figure it out. We have since 2017 2018 have thought that a decentralized that blockchain actually provided a solution to age verification and just identity online because it's privacy protecting. And interestingly, we found that Google has rolled out ZK proofs, which is the name of the tech, in a product. And then we also, on the accountability point, we concluded that, we agree with Tim Sweeney's comments about parents leading the verification and then doing it once so that you can access then other areas of the internet as long as you're kind of approved and verified. Because the idea that you just laid out, James, to me is very scary. All of us having all of our data out there is literally, I think in an AI world, you thought Cambridge Analytica was scary. You haven't seen anything yet.
I think I understand what you're saying, Eliza. Definitely. I just think that isn't how it'd be used, unfortunately. If no one has heard of this or watched this before, there's a thing on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. Really good watch, and it's a lot of original sort of engineers from Facebook, Instagram, stuff like that. And the amount of data they already track with us, they will be able to prompt if I am in vicinity of Miles. They'll be able to prompt a notification from Miles to be like, "Hey, yo, he's near you." They see what we do all day, every day. They already know more about us than we do ourselves. They can already predict what we're going to decide based off of what they push to us. I think, us giving up our ID and our identity is probably the last step of the internet ever being whatever it was or is as of right now. And I think it drastically, if we do that, I think the internet drastically changes in the next 5 years, and people will want to get off of the internet and go back into the real world, which is maybe what they want, but I feel like they do it a lot more for control than anything else.
I agree that the reasons behind this are more likely more nefarious than positive, or that the way that they are currently going to be implemented is going to go with the times, which is to make it worth their own while. However, I think that right now, I do want to speak for the voice of that there are serious problems. And yes, that's where their social media bans are coming in. And I think that that is a step in the right direction, whether it seems harsh or not, because we are going to need to penalize repeated bad behavior on a grand scale before we're going to rectify the systematic bad behavior in this policy. And that's why I think that we have multitude of problems, and this is a whack-a-mole scenario, and as soon as this patchwork scenario that we're doing with ID isn't going to cut it, we're talking about some sort of bigger collision or some sort of bigger revolution or some bigger reckoning that needs to come to the point where this accountability goes to the
I strongly agree with that.
businesses.
I think I'll make 3 quick points. Number one, your description, which I think is right about punishing, eliminating bad behavior. One of the problems with that is bad is subjective and subject to lobbying. I think what is going to be more actionable is going to be objectively defined invasive behavior. Which would include, obviously the youth bans and social media bans are a component of that. But it will also be places in which, and I'm not even going to say it's not necessarily just media, social media. I think it is actually simply going to be, automated, digitally controlled entities that appear in your interfaces in certain ways. You got to start with an objective standard. I think that's coming. Second point, I think there's a very big question in terms of what's coming between, and I've made this before, and it's something I'm going to harp on a lot, whether or not it's private entities that control this. So in my framing, Google and Apple especially, who are the gateways to identities, and authorization and affirmation and everything else, or it's government entities or some coordinated set of government entities. Unfortunately, the state of the world today is such that I don't think the governments of the world could agree on the price of a cup of coffee, let alone something this complex. So I personally think the first line of defense will be Apple and Google. And then the last thing is, I do think there are some pretty significant generational differences, including probably some represented among the seven of us here, about what expectations of privacy and data proliferation look like online. Where, I think there's a reasonable case to be made that people, let me say this without making it demographic, people should just generally not expect any privacy at all in information that they put online, etc. And how that evolves over time is, a big question, but I think younger people already have that, let's call it, lack of expectation.
Yeah, I would love to hop in on that really quick. I think, and I can't speak for Zan either, but I know that's definitely my mentality. It's I've never expected that anything I'm doing on the internet is not visible, right? Like I think everything is just out in the open, and I behave accordingly. And I think that brings the point I wanted to make, and this is a good segue, but I think these are profoundly important questions that we're talking about, But I always come back to the part that I think we're still missing, and we've been missing for since I was a kid, which is just general education. Like internet, literacy is not taught in schools. It's not, kids are still not taught what is the point of an algorithm? Why is it, what is it putting in front of you? How should you have critical thinking and how to approach it? I think people are, this isn't the right word, but I'm going to use it. Like, I think people are sometimes too lazy to go and figure out what's actually happening on platforms. And they are just like, hey, this feels bad. I'm told this is bad. Please fix it. And that's kind of where we're at. But I feel the same way with, this conversation around Roblox. It's a very complex issue that I think people are, screaming to fix, but I don't think they actually understand what's happening there. They're just kind of like, Roblox is the babysitter. But I think for me, the biggest thing is I still think people are not educating themselves. I think education is massively important. And I just think it's just not changing fast enough.
I totally agree with that, but I think you're attributing educational, let's call it, agency and competency to schools, which in the digital realm is
Yes.
not a place that those belong, because frankly, a lot of adjacent things to what we're talking about here are existential threats to the typical school, right? I mean, my
Fair
kids,
point.
or at least one of them, learns a hell of a lot more from a variety of online services and from doing things himself online than he does in school. And I just mean comprehensively. And I do think that self-education, including with agentic coaching and all of that, is like it has a much bigger role in the world. And teachers are not going to write themselves out of existence. So it's the rare teacher who would take that initiative, and especially in U.S. public schools, good luck agreeing on that curriculum.
I mean, and
Yeah.
this is where the social media accountability is really also like they have to be held accountable for the algorithms, which silo the topics into these boilerplate points, which end up into a screaming fest, which because it has been for over a decade now that the angry engagement is the winning engagement, not the voice of reason, which means that that's why these conversations just end up breaking apart into silly and we don't get anywhere. So,
Can I just add a generational? Go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, just on the accountability thing, that does happen. Like, it's been pretty, world press that the UK has gone and arrested people. It is not difficult. If I say something outrageous to you and you report it to the police, they can, whatever wording you want to use, I'll use American wording, subpoena your details from that company. They can pinpoint me with my IP. They don't need my date of birth. They don't need me to upload my passport. They don't need my driving license.
but
That is, accountability already happens. People just don't
that's
report
very
it.
special in UK, honestly.
Totally.
That is not the case for a lot of countries. I have looked into this and it is
Yeah, but if we can do it, our small little island, why can't everyone else?
but that's what I'm
I think it
saying.
does
Yeah,
happen in the U.S., Alexa.
I think
mean,
I think you're
we just
right
had a
from an
Go
ability
ahead.
standpoint, but in the U.S., like Not a single one of the companies we're talking about is headquartered in the UK, nor does it lobby the British government extensively or have captive members. So there's a unique position relative to the companies involved that is also an important input into that problem. It's very
Which
unfortunate, but I think that's the sad truth.
which shows that they're sorry, Andrew. Just really quickly, last point. Which shows that they're like the reason for doing this is not safety. It is data. They don't. These
100%.
companies like don't do anything fast. Like they don't.
Totally.
Our phones are designed to be like Vegas. Like that's what they're designed to be. And it is always how can we make the next buck. I would love to live in a world where the stuff we are doing is for safety and the stuff that we're doing is for change, but it isn't. It is how can we do something to make more money? That's the reality of the world, unfortunately.
I did mean the accountability is mostly should be on the companies, as that's who ones who needs to start to be held accountable for the continuous behavior. And then it trickles down
You say
accountability.
companies. Clarify companies.
Well, I mean, the social media entities, the ones who
Platforms.
are the platforms who are, holding this user information, who are setting these precedents, who have control over the algorithms, who make the decisions that, the engagement that gets the most enragement is the ones that pop to the top. You could have completely different ways of building these systems, but it doesn't suit them.
So I agree mostly with what you're saying, James, because I also think that on your point, Miles, on the generational gaps, kids, the next gen will just figure out they'll be not even 20 minutes, not even a day, not even a week, months, years ahead of anyone who's actually regulating this, but they won't be years ahead of actual pedophiles. And they will figure out ways to go around the system and get access in different ways, and that will be the criminal way to do that. Like I feel like we need to like just not be naive that this is just that this is going to stand still once we have these kind of, okay, we put these rules in place, now it's over, kids are protected. It won't work out like that.
But we still need to do things. And
Yeah.
so, I think this is the conversation is we need to do things, but maybe I don't think these are the right things because clearly, there are several aspects of bad actors
Mhm.
and possibility of nefarious usage. And those issues should be addressed at the top to be able to be, structured design wise across the platforms.
Well, this is what we looked into in the report. I don't know if Xandros, you want to give kind of some of our key conclusions, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this all started, I will say, like with Roblox and Discord was like the two big ones over the last, 2 months, that the announcements of global age verification. And, upset over that. And I think the energy put towards like, why are they asking us to verify our age? Like, will this happen? Is I don't want to say like useless use of your energy. Like, it's happening. Like, this is not a question of like, will this happen or not? It's just like, when will each country adopt something like this? And now I think the question is just like, what's the best way to do it? And instead of thinking about, oh, how awful is this? It's like, okay, well, how can we minimize the risk of what's most important to me is like data storage, data breaches, and like privacy. So we talked about like blockchain and like ZK proofs are a great way to do that. And then I actually agree somewhat with Mike where like the Apple and Google, I mean, I don't know, they have my passwords, they have my credit cards, they already have all of this information. They know who I am. They know who I am. They know my birthday. Like, I just don't think it's like, I think it's naive to think like they don't already know your identity. So why are we really, I mean, this is a simple way of saying like, what does it matter to this like now provide your age if it does help protect kids? Because this is a huge issue that like there's plenty of stuff that kids should not see on the internet, not just on Roblox and like that's the focus, but across the board. And I think it's somewhat of a simple fix where we've already decided in the past that kids shouldn't be exposed to certain things in the real world. So I don't understand like the disconnect of like, well, just because it's online, it's okay. Yeah, I think that's where my beliefs come from a little bit, and I think the report looks at these all of these questions, it asks a lot of these questions that we brought up today.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so it is already 9:31. We were going to go into this news about Google and Epic, and actually I'll just share my screen, and Keshav, give us a couple of headlines and we can cover it next week. If you think that makes sense. And then also I would love to get Mike to cover a couple of headlines on the crypto space. Keshav, you want to give a
Sure. Just
summary of
quickly,
this?
on Epic and Google, I feel like there's still a lot that has to be revealed. Obviously, we know for a fact that they have signed a term sheet between them, with a few details that have been revealed. That there's a conversation, there's a mention of metaverse browsers that would be a part of or a type of that you could start finding inside Play Store and the Epic Game Store as well. But the headline there is um, Epic and Google have come to terms. And not all of them have been revealed yet, and they are implementing these changes globally. Or Google has already started by implementing these changes globally going forward for most countries that do not require an agreement from a judicial body on a settlement or a proposal. So, not in the US yet, because the judge still has to rule on the settlement. But at least globally, they have decided to lower their standard fees. It ranges between 10 to 20% for different purchases and activities that go inside the App Store. There is a lot of conversations around link outs. There's conversations around registered stores inside of the Play Store, which I would definitely want to cover next week. Because I feel those are threads that we've spoken about in our Epic report as well as the major issues with the current app stores, which is allowing third-party app stores as well as allowing third-party payments. So there are a lot of updates there. But yeah, let's get into the weeds next week on those.
That sounds great. Okay, Mike, do you want to wrap it up? There's some big crypto news this week.
Yeah,
And
I
anything
think
else you want to talk about as quick hits?
yeah, sure. No, we'll just stick to crypto. I mean, with all of the, I guess 2 points. One, just sort of broader macro. We're certainly having a push and pull again now with, is Bitcoin in particular and the rest of crypto a viable diversifier in periods of geopolitical and other macro uncertainty? And unlike other periods over the last, let's call it 4 months, preliminary answer over the last week or so appears to be pretty positive for Bitcoin in particular. The price action's been excellent. There's certainly a case to be made that facilitating transfers and alternatives to kind of TradFi rails is particularly important in times of conflict and that sort of thing, which I don't need to go into. But the other thing, probably more substantively, is just a focus on the market structure bill, the Clarity Act in the U.S., which has taken. There's been a few points of progress, but the biggest one by far. We're kind of bookending our Game Souk today with discussions of things President Trump tweets about. Is that Trump met with Brian Armstrong of Coinbase and endorsed the Coinbase position relative to the banks, talking about how important it is for yield to be available for in this case stablecoin holders, but make America the home of crypto. Blah, sorry, I don't mean to sound glib here, but blah blah blah, right? And on the face of it, that's pretty positive and reflects momentum. There is certainly more momentum for the bill now than when things sort of sputtered in February, late January and early February. I do think that there's a very reasonable likelihood that this thing gets done before the midterms. You're seeing, I hate to reference prediction markets and things like that, but you're seeing that trend up a little bit. I don't think it's 90%, but I think it's higher than 50%, much higher than 50%. What I will say as a note of caution on the Trump thing is that one of the things that needs to get resolved to win over reluctant Republican votes and even more importantly, reluctant centrist Democratic votes who are going to go against the banking lobby is that there have to be some controls on, among other things, some of the Trump crypto stuff and, just the blatant crap coins and I'll try not to swear and everything else. And in certain ways, Trump's endorsement here actually hurts the ability to do that. So Trump is not brokering a deal, he's endorsing a position. And I think the ideal for the bill to get done is brokering a deal. But that's really not something that Trump does anyway. So maybe that would be a silly expectation. At any rate, this is overall getting some momentum, and overall that's pretty positive for crypto writ large, and you see it in the price action. We've bounced pretty authoritatively off the low 60,000s in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I mean, I think we should just observe. We're big. Our mantra is merge onto the highway of behavior, so we're observers of behavior, and it's amazing to me that in this Game Souk, and having had decades of following technology and media and gaming companies, I don't spend a lot of time talking about politics or politicians, or certainly not the president. And anyway, we forgot to mention Anthropic, OpenAI, Eliza.
Yeah, I mean, on the heels of accountability guardrails, are there any? Should there be any? Anthropic took a stance against the U.S. government and essentially lost their deal with the U.S. government because they wanted more guardrails. Feeling that in this case of AI, there definitely needed several instances where they were uncomfortable with the precedents that was being set. In doing so, they won the hearts and minds of the general public around AI, and people flocked to Anthropic en masse. OpenAI, on the other hand, went to sweep up the Pentagon deal and lost users in droves. So it's I would say in the current political climate where it is as you said, Mike, who's going to agree on even the price of coffee? Everything is going to be political at this moment. I do not think that we are going to get away from these political discussions. I think, unfortunately, it is going to get more entrenched in our conversations, whether we want to do that or not, because it is hard to not factor in, especially with as big things as AI, which carries massive risks. And when you talk even about that user identity and information, the level of information that you get in AI is a whole other scenario. And James, what you were saying about, that they know wherever you are, AI will be able to visualize and pinpoint you in the world and who's next to you just based on bounced off data. It'll in the future triangulate cloud imagery out of nothing with no surveillance. So, we are in a very, very strange period. So, but yay, Anthropic, standing up, becoming a hero, winning the hearts and minds. We definitely need more of that.
We heard your perspective as someone based in Europe, and you are saying that a lot of European companies are going to take this.
I'm certain. I mean, Europe does not have, unfortunately, enough of a horse in the race of this really big technological leap. And for them, I think in this part of the world we have long held, a strong relationship with the US as allies and felt like we can, that the trust was there, that we can trust in the American companies and that we can work and feel confident in our own sort of political parameters being met. I think that trust has eroded in a lot of ways, and we are in a very trust deficit times. And these are the issues that is being asked in European governments about what can we allow citizens here in Europe to partake in, just like the US president is asking about Tencent. I think the scrutiny is coming back the other way. I think and I said, whatever happens behind closed doors is increasingly an issue because we have fundamentally lost trust. And that's hard to get over.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap there, but just on the trust, I do want to leave another thread for next week, which is these blockchain solutions that we write about in our report, ZK proofs, for example, are trustless. Once you set them up, you don't need, it's set and forget. You have the ability to basically verify your credentials, and then there are yes, no questions being asked about, are you over 18? Are you under 16? Are you over 13? And these are yes, no's, and they do not divulge PII at every single transaction or every single moment. So anyway, read our report if you want to learn more about trustless technology for age verification. And next week, we're going to pick up on a lot of these threads. So thanks everyone for a good Game Souk, and we'll see you next time. Bye.